I'm Laura Richardson with Relevate, and we're bringing you another episode of I'm Moving to North Carolina, Now What? So, this one's really big. Questions to ask your real estate agent before you sign a contract with them. Remember, anybody who's going to be listing your home or working with you to buy a home, you have to sign what's known as an agency agreement. So, before you sign on the dotted line, what are some things that in that interview process would be beneficial to ask them? So, for starters, communication. That's key. That's huge. How are they going to communicate with you? How often? When are they going to give you expected updates? And then one of the biggest ones that people fail to ask is what happens when that person is out of communication? I know that real estate agents sometimes eat and sleep and on occasion maybe take a vacation. But what happens to you as the client during those downtimes? So if they're out of pocket, who is your secondary point of contact? And what capability does that person have to answer those questions? Do they have knowledge of your transaction, knowledge of you and your family? So make sure that communication is not something that gets left off the table. The second one is negotiations. So how do they negotiate? How do they interact with other agents? What type of proactive communication do they either send or receive in order to make sure that there's an open door policy for asking questions, especially if there's a question about a property, if there's rules like covenants and HOA restrictions, things like that that are high likely to come up in conversation. How is that agent communicating those things? Are you going to call for highest and best? How do we negotiate contract terms? Do you have to take things as face value? What happens in a counteroffer situation? How many times can you go back and forth? Basically, what is their protocol and their process for making sure you have all the information at your feet? And then, if you were to go into multiple offers, how do they help you compare apples to apples to kind of figure out what you're comfortable with and where maybe you need to tweak just a little bit in those responses? The other one is also something that every July should be a conversation with your agent. So let's say that you're choosing to list in the fall. What recent changes in the real estate rules are now going to apply? So, just so you know, every year, July 1st, new rules roll out. These are sometimes just contract change tweaks, but sometimes there's some big stuff that can happen in the world of real estate. So, your agent should be in the know of these things, especially because by the end of August, we have a 60-day rule. By the end of August, these should be implemented. So we're talking about the latest version of contracts. If there's been significant changes on, let's say, what conveys, or that you have a 7-day loophole to get out of a contract versus a 14-day, or if there's something big, like in 2019, they got rid of a finance contingency. There's a lot of big things that can come down the pike and some little ones that happen just because people have argued over them. Like during the COVID era, a lot of people bought home gym equipment. And then all of a sudden, people were arguing over whether or not this was a fixture. Lo and behold, it only took a couple years. They've now added that to the contract where it's a little bit more explicitly stated. So, this is something that I would talk to them about. Are you in the know on the current changes and updates? And is there anything that kind of pertains to our particular situation or our home that really is kind of in line with those changes? The next one, and this is pretty standard, how do they market your property? And what costs associated with that now fall on you or on them as a part of the package deal of working with them? And then something that I would say is a little tweak to the question of, let's say, what type of awards have you gotten or how many deals have you done? So asking for stats that they are proud of. Whenever you ask somebody to give an example of something that they feel is important, it is not just breaking down to the data. So let's say that they were proud of how many deals they've done or how much closed sales volume or how low of a day on market. The way that they kind of package that is also going to be indicative of their character and the way that they communicate, the ability to be able to answer questions on the fly. So just know there's a little bit more to that question than just the standard, just give me a statistic. A couple other pro tips that I think are really important is be careful to ask questions like, how many years have you been in real estate? There are plenty of agents that I've come across that have been doing this for 20 years, but they might only do 2 deals a year. And because of that, they don't have as much experience as somebody, let's say, who's been in the business maybe 2 years, but they've managed to accrue 40 deals in that time. So just know that sometimes the question you ask is not really the question you mean. And it's really important that you kind of tweak that. I would say change it to what experience have you gained in the time that you've been in real estate? Because then they can speak to actual situations and stories where they came out the hero, that they were able to help their clients, and how that would actually relate to your potential experience. Another pro tip is asking them specifically, how many deals have you done in my neighborhood? I love getting this question specifically because a lot of people are trying to say, okay, should I go with a hyper local agent versus somebody who does a little bit more broad spectrum here in the triangle? Well, to kind of give it to you in a numbers form, there are over 6,600 6600 subdivisions in Wake County. So Wake County is our main county here in the triangle, right? So if you were to give an agent one deal per subdivision in the neighborhood, they would be closing 18 listings per day and probably racking up, let's just say the average home is 500 grand, over $3.3 billion in closed sales volume. It's just statistically and logistically not possible. Even if they did half that, still not possible. So the likelihood that a seasoned agent is only going to do business in your neighborhood is pretty slim. So it's really important to kind of change that question to, what features of my home or my neighborhood or my area do you plan to highlight in your marketing? That's going to show depth of knowledge on where the listing is actually placed, as well as their understanding of maybe some nuances. There's a lot of master plan communities here where there's various builders that have built within the same neighborhood. Some of those homes might garner a higher price per square foot because of the level of customization that was done with that particular builder. Or there could also be locations that are closer to a particular park, or greenway access might be a little bit easier. There might be some that back up to the main drag. That heavy highway noise is going to be a factor. So if the agent can answer that question about what they specifically are going to market, it's also going to show, were they prepared for the conversation from the get-go. So just remember again, always make sure that the question you're asking is not lobbing them up to give you the answer they want to give. The interview should go both ways, and you should be able to get as much intel as possible on not only what they can do for you, but how they're going to do it and what personality you're going to be getting a contract with. So if you have any questions, feel free to drop those in the comments below. We would love to answer those. And as always, I'm Laura Richardson with Relevate, and we'll see you on our next episode.